So I want to start this morning, or this afternoon, almost, with a question. Who here has ever heard the age-old saying that with risk comes reward? A few hands? So we got quite a few of you. Good. Good to know most of you haven't been living under a rock. But I want to share a quote from the late Muhammad Ali, who said, "He who is not courageous enough to take risks will accomplish nothing in life." Think about that for a moment. What do you think he means by that? If we fail to take risks, we can't achieve anything, right? Yet so many of us fail to take risk for the fear of failure. We live in a society that looks down upon failure. A society that looks down upon those who have had the courage to actually give it a go. Have you ever wondered why? I've been interested in the subject of success since my early 20s, wondering what is it that sets the successful apart from the rest? And what is it that sets the successful companies apart from their competitors? So today I want to share with you a little bit about my background, a little bit about my learnings on this exact subject, and hopefully inspire you to go out there, to take some risks, and to take action. But you're probably wondering, who's this guy and what gives him the right to share his tips on this exact subject? So I'm going to share a little bit about my story. Now, although I'm an engineer, I'm an electronics engineer by trade, I've actually practiced in many industries and I've held quite a few different roles. I've been an engineer, a team leader, a general manager, business owner, and director. So I'd like to think that I have a fair handle on what it means to actually take a risk. But to give you a bit of an idea about my upbringing, I'm from a working class family. My dad was a baker by trade, and then he had 3 of his own businesses. He started as a car salesperson, had his own car yard. He then had his own lawn mowing round, and then an antique furniture store in multiple locations for over 20 years. And I worked in all but one of those organisations, as did my family. So it was quite a family affair. But I was brought up with 3 key values: work ethic, respect, and keeping my promises. And I was a public school boy, average grades. But with that upbringing, I became the first person in my family to actually go on and complete university studies. So my family was actually pretty proud. But I want to take you back to a story in year 11 when I was doing maths 2. And my teacher came up to me one day and it said, "Emilio, we need to have a chat." Now, I don't know about you guys and girls, but when the teacher said to me they needed to have a chat, it wasn't always a good thing, because I was the type of guy that would bring home the report cards that said things like, "Emilio talks too much in class," "Emilio struggles to stay on task," and "Emilio could do better." Did anybody get that one? Yeah, a few nods in the room. It's a bit of a kick in the teeth, that one. But he pulled me aside and he said, "Emilio, there's no way that you're going to pass year 11 maths 2. Sorry, year 12 maths 2. So you might as well just forget it." And unfortunately, I didn't have the same level of self-belief that I do now. And I actually let him bring me down. I listened to him and I didn't enroll and do maths 2 in year 12. And the reason that was a bit of an issue was because in year 12, about halfway through, I realised that I actually wanted to do electronics engineering in uni. And to get into that, I needed math 2. So I had to enroll in a bridging course, and that would happen over the summer break, of course. And being someone who lives in Adelaide on one of the locals, near the beach, someone who loves the beach, that was a bit of a problem for me. I didn't like that. But I did it. I enrolled in a 5-year double degree, electronics engineering and management. And about halfway through that program, and I should say that I was actually surrounded by people from way more privileged backgrounds than myself. People that had come through the private schooling system with high 90s as their score in year 12. Whereas I'd scraped in with just over 70. But I realised that I was doing pretty damn well. And it wasn't that I was dumb in high school. And it wasn't that I was just smart in university. It was none of those things. It was that for the first time in my life, not only did I know where I was heading, but I knew why. And that gave me the actual desire to put the effort in and actually give it a go. And with that, I completed my university studies. I came out with the highest grade point average, which completely blew me away. The guy that just scraped in came out with the highest grade point average in that cohort. But I went on and I got my first graduate role in a company called BAE Systems Australia, the largest defence contractor in this country. At the time, 6,500 people. And I got to do some pretty cool stuff, working on radar warning receivers, technology that's warning pilots of incoming threats, and do flight trials and see my boss throw up in front of me in the aircraft, which was a lot of fun. But within just a short couple of years, I started being recognised for my success again. And I can tell you that within a company that size, full of engineers and technicians and smart people, accountants too, for those of you who are accountants, there were definitely way more intelligent people to the left and to the right of me. Yet for some reason, I was being recognised. In 2010, I won this state's Defence Industry's Young Achiever Award. And in 2011, the Early Career Engineer of the Year Award within BAE Systems nationally. And yes, I put in the 1%ers. Yes, I put in the extra work, I believe so. But I still couldn't understand why I was seeing this level of success. So I started to speak to a few of my good mentors and I asked them that question, what is it that's setting me apart here? Why am I seeing this success? And what they told me was it was because I was the one that was willing to put my hand up more often than not and give it a go. I was the one that had become comfortable with the uncomfortable. And it was that, no, actually, who's ever heard of those people that tell you that they're going to change something? You talk to them every day and they go, I've had enough of this workplace, I'm out of here. Or I'm about to book this holiday to the US and in 8 weeks' time I'm going to be gone. And then you catch up with them 12 months later and nothing has changed. Well, that was the type of person that I didn't want to be, because I was always brought up to keep my promises. And it was that, the ability to actually take a risk and take action, that I believe saw me with that success. And from there, I got put onto a leadership program and I met a guy by the name of Simon Kennedy. He was the owner and managing director of a company called Smart Fabrication, a company with about 70 people, quite a diverse metal fabrication organisation. And he said to me after about 8 months, and I was 27 years old, mind you, and just to let you know, I'm actually close to 33. I do get ID'd every now and then, but I have some experience. I was 27 years old at the time, and he pulled me aside and said, Emilio, I want you to come and have a look at my business. And I remember thinking to myself, are you crazy? Do you really think I'm going to give up this huge career within BAE with a 10-year plan? They actually had 10-year plans sort of for you, where they get organisational psychologists in and the general manager of the business unit, because you were seen as a high potential, high performer. And I said, do you really think, to myself, do you really think I'm going to give that up to come and work for a small to medium family enterprise? But being the type of person I was that didn't say no to opportunities, I actually went and had a look. And pretty quickly I saw that it was quite an exciting place, quite diverse. Culture was fantastic. But it was when he said to me, Emilio, would you like the opportunity to really hold the reins of this business and run it as if it's your own? That excited me. And it was a big career move for me. It was a big career decision. Who's ever had to make a decision like that? It took me 3 weeks. I spoke to a few of my good mentors again. I actually went into the organisation and spent a full day getting to know the people, the challenges, to understand what I was getting myself in for. And after that 3-week period, I decided I was going to take the plunge. And was it easy? No. Did I have all of the knowledge, all of the experience, and the networks to actually make it as a general manager in this company? No. But what did I have to lose? At the end of the day, I thought I can go back to the defence industry if this doesn't work out. And I just had a mortgage. I didn't have any kids or anything like that. But the biggest reason that I made that choice was because when people look back on their lives, I truly believe that people often regret the decisions they never made more than the regretful decisions they did. And with that, I joined the company. And SmartFab, we operated in defence, water, civil, infrastructure, and I got to do some cool stuff. I got to work with the senior leadership team, put together the formal strategy for the first time, and roll that out amongst the staff. I got to work on a cultural transformation program because we were looking at becoming more progressive, more innovative. We were getting disrupted ourselves as an organisation in the fabrication industry. But it was 2012 at this point, and the fabrication industry was really hurting. There were companies that were looking at closing and were closing. There were companies that were looking at laying people off. And what did we do? We decided to do it differently. We got in the boardroom, and as a senior leadership team, thankfully, I had a boss, the managing director of the company and the owner, who was a true entrepreneur. He trusted his gut more than most. And we decided as a team that we were going to go and tackle the oil and gas industry. For a company that had never done that work before, we were going to break into that industry just when everybody else was looking at getting out or slowing down. And we invested a hell of a lot of money in setting up a new production site in South Australia, a second one, that was purpose-built for oil and gas pipe fabrication. It became the largest privately owned pipe fabrication facility in the state. And within a short 12-month period, we had over a dozen of the biggest oil and gas clients on our books. The Santoses, the Beach Energies of the world, the APA groups. They all came on and they loved what we were doing. And we were going through tremendous growth, the pain associated with that, with business systems, trying to bring the right people on board, all of those things. Could we have done it better? I have no doubt. I have no doubt that we could have done it slightly better and perhaps improved the margin, perhaps reduced the stress on the organisation. But as George Patton once said, a good plan today is better than a perfect plan tomorrow. So we were happy with that choice. And the real tipping point came for me in July 2015 when I got to go to this place, Stanford Graduate School of Business. And it's Silicon Valley. People are moving fast and breaking things. You've got the likes of Apple, Google, Microsoft, all within a few minutes of each other. Walking distance. And we had 68 people on this program from way more successful backgrounds than me, yet they were of a similar age group, many of them. There was people from all age groups, but many of the ones that I was sitting with were from a similar age group, yet they were way more successful. They'd built multi-million-dollar companies themselves from scratch. And I wondered why, how? And through the drinking sessions, and we did get to have some good drinking sessions, through the dinners on the evening that they put on, I realised that they weren't actually that much more intelligent. Or in some cases, they just weren't. It was that they had the risk appetite that we just didn't have, that we don't tend to have in a conservative place like Australia. The Yankees are great for it. You know, it's all about go for it. They love it. But then we had people like Condoleezza Rice come in, former US Secretary of State, and she gave her experiences in leadership. She shared those experiences, and then she gave her accounts of 9/11 when she was in charge, because George Bush and Colin Powell, former Secretary of Defense, were both interstate at the time. So she was the one that was actually pulled into the bunker and absolutely grilled as to whether the US had in fact been responsible for shooting down the third plane in Pennsylvania, because they themselves didn't know at the time. And I can tell you that I have never seen a stillness in a room like when Condoleezza was sharing her story. It just sent shivers down your spine. And then we had people like Jeff Jordan. Jeff Jordan is the ex-general manager of eBay. When it was an online flea market, he took it to what it's become today. He then went to PayPal. He was the president there. And we know how much we all use PayPal. He's now working for a venture capital firm, Andreessen Horowitz, one of the best and fastest growing VC firms in Silicon Valley. And we heard earlier about Airbnb. Jeff was the guy behind putting the cash up for Airbnb. So we had some seriously good people come in and talk to us, really inspire us. And I came back from that experience, it had just opened up my eyes. And I knew that I had to do something more. I wanted to share more with what I'd learned over there, with more people, with more organizations. So just a couple of months after getting back, I actually quit my permanent general management role and the pay packet that went with it. It was comfortable. I quit that role at Smart Fabrication and started my own management consultancy, De Stefano & Co. And the people that didn't think I was crazy when I left BAE for SmartFab, well, I can tell you they sure as hell did now. But am I happy with my choice? Well, I'm actually really comfortable with it because I get to do more stuff like this, which is my passion. But the reason behind making that choice was because I didn't want to ever be left wondering about what might have been. So, as golfers, we have challenges. Well, I do anyway. And this is often what I look like on the golf course. I actually went out and played 9 holes. Don't have time for 18. 9 holes. Last Saturday morning, I can tell you that I actually bought 3 balls, thinking that might be enough. And I borrowed 3 more from my friends because I lost them. And that was here at West Beach, which is a beautiful course, just that it has lots of shrubbery and lots of places to lose your ball. No, but I know in all seriousness that you guys are facing challenges, and I've seen the picture out the front that Patty did this morning. I know that you visualise what you want your futures to look like. I know that you've looked at your challenges. I know you've spent the last couple of days doing that, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. But disruption, as we heard from Steve this morning, it is relentless. And when you look at what other games are doing to take your customer segment and make them their customers, when you look at what, and Wayne will know this well, when you look at what cricket has done, taking it from a match that used to take 5 days. In the 1970s, Kerry Packer said, "No, we're going to make it 1. And we're going to make this a huge spectacle." And he did that very successfully. And what's Cricket Australia done more recently? Very successfully brought in 2020 cricket, where you can go after work, have a few beers with the mates, and you're done within a few hours. So there's those types of challenges. There are also challenges associated with the fact that people just don't have as much time as they used to play 6 hours worth of golf on a Saturday. There's more single-parent households, which means that often, and this is generally speaking, it is the father, your biggest customer segment, that are the ones that on a weekend are responsible for looking after the children, which means they can't play their golf unless they take their kids, which I know you're doing some great stuff with My Golf. Fantastic. But there's other challenges too. Agile workforces. What does that do for your membership model? Can you expect that someone's just going to come to your golf course? No, you need the reciprocal rights. And I know that many of you would have those, but it's the quality of those reciprocal rights. I can tell you there are more people expected to be here today, and then in the US next week, and then somewhere in Berlin the week after, and then back home, than there ever has been. And this year, I've travelled quite a few countries around Europe, been expected to be in Sydney last week. I was home, obviously, before that. I've been in Singapore and Malaysia for work. So those are the types of challenges you're facing. Now, for me, if I was a keen golfer, I'm a very average golfer, I'd be looking for a club that has great reciprocal rights to great clubs elsewhere. because that's what's going to matter, because I'm not always here. But there are also opportunities. Significant opportunities associated with younger generations. And look, people these days, they are more about working to live than living to work. They care more about their lifestyle. They have more disposable income. We've got more disposable income amongst younger generations than ever before. And they're happy to spend that on things like memberships or playing a game on the weekend. But we also have young people that want to get out there and have fun with their mates, their friends. They don't necessarily want to get dressed up to the T and do the traditional thing. There's also, as you heard from Steve, there's less people that care about owning. They don't care about owning a car anymore. They won't do, especially when there's driverless cars. They don't care about owning a house. They're renting. They're happy to lease. They're happy to call an Uber. So that plays into your hands. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of how to actually take risks and inspire action, there are certain things that I think you must do. You must have right before you go on this journey. This conference, from what I understand, has been about change. The change that's coming, the changes that are here, the changes that you need to make. But making changes, you can't do it unless you have the foundations or the fundamentals right. I often use the analogy of building an extension on a house. If you want to build a second story and you don't have your foundations right, it's all going to come tumbling down, and it's no different in the organisational context. Now, with these must-dos for success, I'm going to talk about each of them on the individual level as well as the organisation, because to me, they play an equal importance. If you don't get it right here, it's very hard to get it right within the organisation. So the first one is to find your passion. This is about finding your inner why. Why do you do what you do? And if you get up most mornings, or more mornings than not, thinking, yeah, why do I have to go to work today? Then maybe you're just not in the right job. Maybe you should think about what it is that you would prefer to do. Because it's not only doing a disservice to you, but your organisation. And from an organisational perspective, this is so important, and you hear the Simon Sineks of the world talking about this constantly. Organisations lose sight of their own purpose, their own why. And it is the Apples of the world that are so successful at articulating their why, at showing what they stand for, that actually gets people to want to follow them, to want to line up for hours for the new iPhone. So if you don't have this right as a leadership group yet, and if it's not well understood by the people on the floor, the worker bees, then you need to do this first. Setting your goals. Now, it goes without saying that most of you are here today. I could bet my money on it that you do this well. You set your goals well because you wouldn't be here. You're all successful people in your own rights. But this is about setting not only clear goals, but ambitious goals. Too often, the reason that we don't achieve what we want out of life is because we don't set the bar high enough. And the same can be said for your organisation. Not only do they need to be clear and ambitious, but they need to be communicated well. They need to be flowed down throughout the organisation at every level, right down to the floor. And then you need to measure against them regularly. If you're not doing that, the goals are almost not worth having. Ensuring your goals are aligned with your desires. This is back to my year 11 compared to doing the bridging course for maths. When I really didn't have any desire to do it, do you think I did well? Didn't care. All of a sudden, when I knew why I was doing it, when I knew that I wanted to become an engineer and that it was on the line, I put a hell of a lot more effort in, and I did well. You know, this is like having somebody say they want to lose weight, yet they don't really care if they do. It's just not going to happen. And in an organisational context, if your goal is to bring on more millennials, if that's what you say, but you don't have agreement with your board or your leadership group, and they're going, nah, stuff that. No, we have impeccably dressed people. We want to hold on to the tradition. We don't care about 12-hole golf or 9-hole golf. We're doing 18. Then odds are, it's just not going to work. So you need to have a good think about that. And this, I think, is so important. From a personal perspective, I mix with as many different sorts of people and many different types of people as I can. I mix with people from artistic backgrounds, people from highly analytical backgrounds that hardly speak a word, they just type stuff. And I mix with people that push my boundaries, that push me. Because when you put yourself in someone else's shoes, and only when you do, can you see things from their perspective? And perspective is so important as leaders of your organisations. And in your organisations, this is about employing all sorts. When I was at Stanford, we had 68 people, 27 from the US, the rest from all over the world. All over the world. And I can tell you that I have never seen diversity in action like I did there. In the case study sessions that we were doing, I have never seen solutions put forward like I did there. They just would not have been possible with one cultural background or, people from one kind of socioeconomic area. It is diversity that does that. So if you are serious about involving more women in golf and getting more women into golf, and I've seen the initiatives that Golf Australia are doing with Swing Fit, which is great, but if you're serious about getting them into your clubs, maybe bring a few into your leadership groups if you haven't already. This is about bringing millennials in, if you want to bring in more millennials, because they understand what makes them tick. And the last one is the one that I attribute my success to the most. Being willing to take risks and take action. And this was the same for the companies that I've led. Had we have not done what we did at SmartFab at the time, had we not gone chase that oil and gas work when there was nothing else around, we may not be here today, and that company is still doing very well. So I hear what people are saying. Easier said than done, right? All this stuff about risk-taking. That's true. And let me just clarify. I am not talking about jumping off a cliff. That's me being melodramatic to make a point. I'm talking about taking calculated risks. But I'm talking about taking them, not just talking about them. Now, often people will ask me, but surely risk-taking is just a function of one's personality type, right? You're born with it or you're not. And to some extent, I agree. We are born with varying levels of willingness to take risk. And in some cases, it can be linked, for example, to your level of openness to new experience or your level of conscientiousness. They're quite different. The person with a high level of openness to experience, they're going to be more willing. The person that's quite conscientious, maybe less so. And if you look at what international research on risk-taking has been saying for decades, what it suggests is that in general, and on average, over our lifetimes, our willingness to take risk comes down. And it's only as recent as early last year that new research has been published to suggest that that may not be true. To suggest that it's actually during early periods of our life that we see significant changes in our willingness to take risk. And also during latter parts of our life, such as when we retire. But I see it a little bit differently to that too. And from my experience in working with people from all different backgrounds, from academia, from industry, from government, what I see is that it actually changes throughout periods of our life, throughout our life milestones. So, for example, if you get married, if you buy a house and get yourself into quite a bit of debt, all of a sudden, not quite as willing to take that risk anymore. Got to pay the mortgage. And what I've noticed is that there appears to be an inverse relationship between our willingness to take risk or our risk propensity and our level of responsibility. Let me show you what I mean. So you've got to tell me if you can see this. I'm going to try and bring it forward a bit. Right, can we see that properly? Great. So what I'm going to do is draw, let's put this down for a moment, a graph. I'm an engineer, put up with me please. A graph where the x-axis is actually our life events. The y-axis, our risk propensity, or our willingness to take risk. And on the other side, the other y-axis, is our level of responsibility. Okay? So, in the Western world, most of us go through a fairly similar life events. Like, we go through a fairly similar life in general. In that we are born, we then go on and do some schooling, and in most cases we go on and do some further education or an apprenticeship, or we might get a job. And then we might meet a life partner, we might get married, we might, buy a house, that type of thing, get ourselves into some debt, mortgage. So I'll just call this marriage/mortgage. Sorry about my handwriting here. And then after that, who's been lucky enough to have some little kiddies? Right. Oh, I can see you're all very happy about it. Sorry, that's there. And if we're really, really lucky, and some of you might have experienced this, your kids will move out eventually. And then eventually, probably at the age of about 75, you retire. And hopefully some long, long period afterwards is when you pass on. Okay, so would we agree that this is a typical life for a Westerner? Right? And on the y-axis, I'm going to rate this from very low, this board moves a bit, to very high. We have medium, low, high. And the same thing on the responsibility one. Very high, medium, very low. So, here's where the fun starts. When we're born, what do you think our level of responsibility is? Can someone give me an answer? 0, right? We got people looking out for us. We don't care. We don't even care how we go to the toilet. Right? So down there. What about our risk propensity, our willingness to take risks? Pretty high? Yeah, I mean, if you look at a 1-year-old that's trying to learn to walk, they fall down, they get back up again, they fall down, they get back up again. They don't care. There's no consequence. So we'll put it up here, very high. Then we might go and do some schooling. And all of a sudden, we start to get taught that there are certain ways you do things. We get taught that you have to rock up on time. You need to bring your school bag. So all of a sudden, there's a little bit of responsibility. So that starts to creep up. And our willingness to take risk. Oh, if I don't do it right, teacher's going to tell me off. All of a sudden, it starts to come down slightly. What about when we have to get a job? When we go and start or do some further education? Again, we've got money to make. We've got some bills to pay. We've got to pay for our education. So again, you see that your level of responsibility actually creeps up a little bit higher. And our level of risk propensity comes down. Meet a life partner. All of a sudden, you're not just looking out for yourself, you're looking out for one another. You've got more responsibility, or you've got yourself a mortgage that you have to pay. You've got to meet those weekly or monthly repayments. All of a sudden, life's not as fun. You're starting to feel like, there's more responsibility in your life. So that goes up, and you can see what's happening here. Once you have kids, and I haven't had that pleasure just yet, but I can tell you through talking to my close friends, they tell me that it feels like the weight of the world is on their shoulders when they have their first child. And they can't do all of the things that they used to do. They are much less willing to take those risks. So risk, propensity, our level of responsibility is right up there, and our level of willingness to take risk comes all the way down here. And as they move out, hopefully you're in a good financial state by this time, you've been working for a while, your willingness to take risk goes back up a little bit, your level of responsibility comes back down, you don't have to feed their mouths as well as your own. So you see this change a little bit. And then you get to retire. And if hopefully your super's worked out well, or your 4-1, whatever it's called in the US, then all of a sudden you can afford to take a few more risks, you can enjoy life, you don't have as many responsibilities, you're not working anymore, all that type of stuff. So it starts to go back up and your level of responsibility comes back down. Then you get to a point where you're about to pass on, or you're closer to that point in life. It always happens. Then you get people that at 85 are saying, you know what, I've got a bucket list. I'm going to tick off all these things. I'm going to jump out of an aeroplane. Level of willingness to take risk. And their level of responsibility, what have I got to lose? So you're down here somewhere. And somewhere back up there. So if we connect these dots, let's just have a look at what it looks like. This is our risk propensity, or our willingness to take risk. Oh, I missed that, didn't I? Bloody hell. Got to go back to art school. And if we draw this one, something like that. And what do we get left with? This area where the two lines intercept each other, which I refer to as our pool of untapped potential. This, ladies and gentlemen, this is where regrets are made. Because just when you get to the point in life where you have developed the knowledge, where you have the experience, and you often have the networks, you've developed the connections, and often the power to go with it to affect real change, you're at your lowest likelihood to actually take a risk. Just when we should be doing so, when the rewards are greatest. And it is the Martin Luther Kings of the world that actually take their risks in this area and create change for generations to come in some cases. Yet so many of us fail to do so for the fear of failure. What could go wrong? And we can actually look at this model from an organizational perspective. It's not too different. When you think that most companies are actually born, they're a startup, they're willing to take risks, they have very little responsibility, hardly any staff, they grow, they start to take on more responsibility, they start to bring in more process. By the time they get here, they've become almost bureaucratic in some cases. And then they've got so many people, they can't afford to pivot and take the risks that they once will have. But what's most important about this graph, this model, is that we need to understand that if we want to put a cultural transformation program into our organization, that's really what it is. If you want to put a program into your company that's going to help people become more willing to take risk, you first need to understand and appreciate that the majority of your people will more than likely sit somewhere in this region. In other words, they are at a point in their life where they may be actively avoiding taking risks because they can't afford to lose their job, and that's what they think could happen. So this is where it's up to you as the leaders of the organization to actually support them and to put a program in place which makes them feel safe to take action. So, when we look at, there's three things behind one's willingness to take risk. There's really only three things, and we do need to understand that before we work on how we develop that ability to actually take risks. Those three things are confidence and self-belief, our knowledge and experience in the given domain, That is the domain that we're going to take that risk. And our tolerance for failure. And this is so important because if you do not have a tolerance for failure, then it doesn't matter how much confidence and self-belief you have, and it doesn't matter how good your knowledge is or experience. If you don't have a tolerance, and it's the same for your company, if it doesn't have a tolerance for failure, forget any of this, because you need to work that out first. But there's 5 steps. And I'm firstly going to go through them for the individual. The first one is to take small risks and build upon them over time. By doing this, if it all goes wrong, the consequences aren't that great because the risks are quite small. And on a personal level, this might be trying something new tonight. It might be trying something new next week. It might be making yourself feel a little bit uncomfortable doing something that you haven't done before. And last year, I actually did a theatre program because I am such a structured process, analytical spreadsheet kind of guy that I thought, you know what? I need to learn how to connect the other side of my brain and how to use that. So I did a theatre program, and I can tell you that when I was driving to that program every week, it was a 6-week program, I would dread going there because I had to act like a robot, all this weird crap that I didn't feel comfortable with. But I would walk out with a big smile on my face, having had so much fun and learned so much more than what I'd already known through dealing with people that come from those backgrounds. The second one is to surround yourself with supportive people. And this is about making sure that you have people around you that believe in you more than you believe in yourself. And I've been so fortunate throughout my career to have this. I have people telling me, what are you doing only charging that? Put your rates up. Or what do you mean you don't think you can do it? Of course you can do it. They're the people that you want around you. You don't want the people that kick you in the teeth when you're down. The people that don't give you a hand when you need to get back up. And often, as I had with my maths teacher in Year 11, it is those people that are closest to us. It can often be our partners. It can be our cousins, our friends. If you have people like that in your life, it's going to be hard to get rid of the partner, but get rid of them. The third one is to stop focusing on worst case scenarios. And I see so many people in my consulting work, I see them doing this everywhere. In some cultures more than some others, but they put so much energy and effort into working out what could go wrong that they forget about what good looks like. And they put no effort into it. And then they don't get there and they wonder why. Fourthly, accept that with risk comes failure. And not only is that okay, but it's what we learn most from. We learn most from our failures. And I can tell you, Jeff Jordan, who I showed earlier, who's the guy behind Airbnb these days, the venture capitalist, he told us a story that when he's looking for a company, a startup to invest in, he will look for a company that has at least one person in their founding team that has failed, not just once, but hopefully a couple of times. Because he understood that for those that really want to make it, often you need to have failed a couple of times. And the last one, and most crucial, is just to get out there, to overcome the analysis paralysis, the non-stop spreadsheeting, weighing up pros and cons, risk management. I understand the need for it, but to get over some of it and just get out there and do it when it's 80% right. Because again, we learn most when we actually do things. Get out there and do it. So from an organizational perspective, we can apply these same 5 steps. The first one, taking small risks and building upon them over time. This is about experimenting, trialing new initiatives. It could be a new marketing campaign. I've seen some stuff out there on Paddy's board about YouTube, using YouTube more. Things that aren't going to break the bank balance, things that aren't going to destroy your club's reputation. It could be trying a 12-hole golf. I know Greg Norman's been going on about it. I don't know how many people are doing it, but it could be trying more of that type of thing. The second one, surround yourself with supportive people. And in the organizational context, this is about actually you as leaders being the supportive people for your people. you as leaders putting in place programs which actually enable them to feel supported. Changing your reward and recognition schemes so that they reward people based on their efforts and their behaviours more than just the outcome. Because I can tell you, if you're going to become an organisation which is more willing to take risks, take action and actually innovate, you need to be an organisation that is rewarding people for the behaviour of actually taking the risk, because it's not always going to work out. The third one, stop focusing on worst case scenarios. As the leaders in your organisations, people are watching you. They're looking at you for when you put a step wrong. They're looking at you for whether you have their back. And if you come out and absolutely clobber somebody, come down on them hard because they've taken a risk and it hasn't quite worked out, I can guarantee you it will stop in the whole organisation if someone sees that kind of behaviour. So you need to be painting a picture of what good looks like for your organisation. You need to create the cause, and the best people to do this, the senior leaders in the organisation, are the ones that get out there and actually do it through storytelling. They help you visualise where you're going. A bit like you visualised your futures this morning with Paddy. Visualising is such a powerful tool. The fourth one, accepting that with risk comes failure, and that's okay. In your organisation, not only do you have to do this, but you also need to share your learnings from the risks that you undertook and that didn't quite work out. You need to understand that you need to undertake lessons learned activities and disseminate that information as best you can. And by doing that, people go, it's actually all right to do this, you know, I'm learning a lot. I don't feel like I'm being criticised. And it becomes more the norm. And the last one, to learn by doing, again, the onus is on the leaders. What better way to do this than to actually lead by example? And to take the initiative, to take the risks, and then share your experiences, good or bad, with your people. And show them that, hey, I'm doing this. Why don't you come on the journey? So important. I can guarantee you that if you're willing to put some of these steps into practice, you will surprise yourself with just how much more willing you are to take a risk. And it's really it goes full circle. Once you do that full cycle of 5 steps, you can go back and start again. And gradually you will build your self-confidence, your self-belief, your knowledge and your experience, and your tolerance for failure. And that's what it's all about. We are going to need to wrap up. I don't have too long left here. But if there's one thing I really hope that you take away with you today, it is this. It is the fact that most the people in your organisation, not through their own faults, may be at a point in their lives where they are actively avoiding taking risks, and they need your support. One thing is absolutely certain, and that is disruption is not going to stop. The disruption that we know and hear about, it's going to continue. It's going to get quicker and quicker. And the companies that fail to do anything about it, they may not exist. So you need to work out whether you are going to embrace that change as leaders and as an organisation, or whether you're going to be swallowed up by it. Swallowed up just like Kodak, just like Blockbuster, huge companies, hugely successful in their own rights in their day. Didn't see it coming, or they did in some cases and went, we're too big for that. It's not going to happen to us. IBM, another one. Compaq computers, within 10 years, had become the biggest computer manufacturer in the world before it was bought out. IBM were arrogant. IBM said, they're not going to catch us. They did. Innovation is also about doing things, okay? It's not about whiteboarding. That's part of it. But innovation is more than brainstorming. It's about experimenting, getting out there, taking risks, and taking action. And I want to ask one last thing. I want to ask that each and every one of you here today make a pact with yourselves that tonight when you go home, that you think long and hard about why it is that you do what you do and why it is that your organisation does what it does. And if there are things that you've been putting off for way too long, then you need to do something about it. Now is the time to be different. And as true as it is for each and every single individual here in this room, as it is for your organisations, I'll leave you with this. Contrary to the Muhammad Ali quote that I opened with, for he who is courageous enough to take risks, anything is possible. Thank you.